Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with my campaign analysis for Tamurkhan, the Mega Lord in Total War Warhammer 3, Immortal Empires. The core design feature for Tamurkhan's campaign is that he is all about heroes, hero variety, be it regular Nurgle heroes or special heroes that are only available in Tamurkhan's campaign. Furthermore, he also has a decent amount of unit variety, more so than Epidemius and Kugav, because of those special heroes, those chieftains he can get. So let's take into consideration how Nurgle works and how Tamurkhan elevates that specific playstyle. See, Nurgle as a race, in terms of unit recruitment, you can only recruit units by going through the entire cycle over here of the seedlings. This is generally slow, but it does create, to an inherent degree, some level of unit variety. Because even if you only have one type of barracks, you are not just going to get a bunch of Chosen of Nurgle until much later on in your campaign. So you're going to be using all kinds of things like Forsaken of Nurgle, Marauders of Nurgle, Chaos Warriors, Pestigors, so on and so forth. And that's just one building chain. If you want to get something like Cavalry, you are going to get all kinds of cavalry and all kinds of different units available over here. But then you also should consider the fact that when you are playing a Nurgle campaign, one of the greatest tools is available to you. Vassalization through diplomacy. And that is not a minor feature. It is more annoying to pull it off with respect to Nurgle because you do need to spend affections and wait a number of turns to get barracks, but you can pull it off when you are playing a Nurgle campaign. You don't have subjugation, but you have diplomatic vassalization. And that vassalization is very important for variety's sake because it gives you access to allied recruitment. And you combine that with the chieftains and their special units that they have access to, including things like Fireglaves, Dreadquake mortars, Gorgons, Mammoths. You end up with one of the most varied armies in Total War Warhammer 3. Different units from different races that are, many of them, very fun to use. To be sure, it's not necessarily the same kind of powerhouse with these units as you would see in something like a Fraud campaign, but it's still a good amount of variety, and you do have a good amount of diplomatic capabilities as well with Tamurkhan. And this is great because Nurgle may have issues in terms of like early game limitations in particular. But Tamurkhan goes a long way towards helping solve those because he'll have so many heroes, chieftain units, that you won't feel the limitations of Nurgle quite as much in this campaign as in others. Another thing worth saying here is that you have 4 different heroes that can be recruited from only two structures, which is fairly unique, I should add, in the context of Warhammer 3. Like, just getting 2 structures, getting 4 heroes at tier 2 is pretty damn rare. And then increasing capacity for both of those heroes at tier 3 is also a significant strength, and it's not reliant on infection. So that is a great situation. If there is a downside when you're looking to play a Nurgle campaign, it's the fact that be it plagues or unit recruitment or even some special research does require you to get infections. But if you have a lot of variety inherently because of Tamurkhan, those issues are not felt in the same way when you are playing this campaign. So that is a pretty significant upside in his campaign. He also gets campaign movement range and recruitment health for all non-demonic units, because the way Nurgle recruits units, it's dependent on the Nurgle corruption in a particular province. So the more corrupt Nurgle corruption there is, the more HP these units will have. It's based on the Thrones of Britannia game, where you could recruit units that were damaged, but they would recover that HP. So replenish. But the more Nurgle corruption you have, the better off you're going to be with that. And Tamurkhan is focused on mortal units, which for every single chaos race, for every single chaos faction, in the context of a campaign, the vast bulk of mortal units are just inherently better than demonic units. Obviously, things like Bloodthirsters or Great Unclean Ones are a different discussion, but I'm talking things like Nurglings or Plague Bearers or Toads or Beasts of Nurgle. Like, just Chaos Warriors of Nurgle are just flat out better. Chaos Knights, Nurgle Ogres or Plague Ogres, just in general, better units than any kind of demonic unit you can get. That is a bit of a balancing aspect and a balancing problem, but it does certainly benefit Tamurkhan. Tamurkhan is also really, really good in Bell. He has Nurgle's favorite son. He has melee attack for non-demonic units, immunity psychology. He recovers very quickly. Even if you wound him in Bell, even if you lose him in Bell, he will recover. He has such a great wound recovery time that he'll recover very quickly. Not as crazy as Vlad per se. But then you conserve things like regeneration for his special skill line, heroic killing blow for his special skill line, plague ogre benefit, and unspeakable foulness as an ability for toad dragons, which he also rides. So he's quite ridiculous in a large number of ways when you are playing. Like, he alone could, I wouldn't say he necessarily solos armies on his own, but even leading an army of Nurglings or Plague Bearers, he would do a lot of damage in a battle. And in fact, he can carry the battle in a large way on his own. Then you add the superheroes he has, it ends up being ridiculous. Like, Nurgle has, overall, I would say from a campaign perspective, Nurgle has some of the best, if not the best, infantry in the game because of the sheer durability. And they're pretty good in terms of damage dealing because of their armor-piercing damage capabilities. I mean, there's obviously, things like Wrathmongers and all that kind of stuff. But when you combine that with all the chieftain units, like Dreadquakes, Fireglaves, etc., and then maybe add an allied recruitment in the mix, it ends up being a very ridiculous combination that allows you to steamroll this entire campaign. So all of that is great, and the campaign itself actually has a good amount of variety because each of these chieftains, if we look at them, you build up relationships with them or fealty for various actions, and then you have a final battle with them. So you are actually gaining money, and more crucially infections, through this entire process. The downsides of Tamurkhan's campaign, like the power is there, the campaign flexibility and variety absolutely is there, and frankly, he should be one of the best legendary lords in the game to play. I emphasize the should be aspect because I think Creative Assembly's design of pacing on a campaign, in quite a lot of cases, including this one, does leave a lot to be desired. Like, if you want to understand where a campaign is really well paced for Warhammer 3's current meta is Arbel's campaign. Like, you can do it very fast. Now, some people will say it's too easy. I don't think anyone can seriously claim that playing Tamurkhan's campaign is difficult. It is just slower. It's not more strategic or anything like that. That is my personal issue on that subject, and one of the things I do have against Tamurkhan. As far as I see it with regards to the Thrones of the Cake campaigns, on one hand, I feel Tamurkhan should be a really interesting campaign to play, but I've never really had that impression. I've played this campaign quite a few times. Certainly not as much as Elspeth and Malachi, but I've played all the Thrones of the Cake campaigns quite a lot. The issue is, there's several issues that come into play. One, the chieftains themselves, to level up their fealty and to also level up this dominance, it just requires you to do a bunch of tedium actions like create plagues, defeat warriors of chaos, for instance, for Kask, and you can not unlock another chieftain until you've gotten Kask to a ledge. So you do need to win those 7 battles or create plagues in order to sort that out. And while the variety is certainly there, you are absolutely going to benefit enormously from pushing with certain chieftains rather than others. Like, Doombolt is just vastly superior compared to everyone else. One, because his fealty is relatively easy to increase. Two, because he can fully replenish the army. And three, because he can give you some really powerful range units as Nurgle, which is incredibly powerful. Sure, the others do give you power, but outside of like the hell cannons that you get over here from the Crazed, Doombolt just ends up dominating that situation. So the variety is there, but if something's significantly better than others, and it's just that slower process and tedium and grind and enter and buttering simulator, whatever you want to call it, that I feel does drag down this campaign. And it's something I've seen from Creative Assembly again and again and again, where they design systems that you'd only really use on a long campaign. And look, according to Creative Assembly's own data, vast majority of people do not play campaigns longer than 80 turns or so. It's data that's been known for a while. Actually, I think that was the case in Warhammer 2, just pointing it out. And Warhammer 2 was different than Warhammer 3, because in Warhammer 2, taking it more slowly, building up, worked better than how things work in Warhammer 3. It's just different pacing. Like, Warhammer 3 is just faster paced. So it is frustrating to see these systems that will only become fully relevant or fully utilized at that kind of turn. And it's also worth saying that a lot of people, when they play those long campaigns, they're also really grinding out like the last 24 turns or something like that, because they've long since won the campaign. So it's a great idea, but it ends up being fluff. That's the reason I like Malachi's campaign or Arbel's campaign, because the systems that you actually have in those campaigns you fully utilize when it's relevant in a campaign. Another issue has to, of course, to do with the usage of infections for plagues and all that. It's important because, Case, when you're looking at, creating plagues with him, etc. So it is a relevant aspect. Furthermore, to consider on this subject, you do start at war with Kholek. That's all well and good, an interesting early game fight, and Kholek is certainly not an easy fight. So Tamurkhan is powerful Legendary Lord going up against also a decently powerful Legendary Lord. I mean, I would say Archeon is the most dangerous Legendary Lord to deal with early on in a campaign, but Kholek is pretty high up there when he's being controlled by the AI. The issue is what happens after you defeat Kholek, and that comes into the victory conditions. Something I had hoped Creative Assembly would change in many of the patches. So victory conditions, and this is not just an issue that affects Tamurkhan, affects Epidemius and Kugaf as well. So you're required to defeat Greasus, you're required to defeat Grimgor, you're required to defeat Kholek. Kholek is sensical. Greasus and Grimgor, not so much. Especially you gotta remember, you can do diplomatic vassalization. And why wouldn't you want to vassalize Grimgor? Grimgor is one of the best legendary lords to actually vassalize because he is ridiculously good as a vassal. Like, seriously, Grimgor will conquer half the map on his own if you make him your vassal. On legendary, at the very least. But you're forced in this situation to destroy him. This is kind of similar to a similar situation was like with Be'lakor when Immortal Empires came out, where Be'lakor, if you look at him on the map, Be'lakor starts at war with this minor Tzeentch faction, and initially you couldn't vassalize them or subjugate them to win your camp as a campaign victory condition. You had to destroy them. So that was a bit awkward. You could just decide to ignore the victory condition, and personally I would say like that is absolutely worth it. The short campaign victory conditions and long campaign victory long is worth it. Man, just not a great affair really over there with respect to those victory conditions. I think there's some mods that help fix that, but it's just annoying. But what's more annoying than just missing out on the opportunity of vassalizing Grimgor, okay, that would be fair enough. But it's also the fact that your objective is to go from the north all the way to the south. And the mountains of Morn are not pleasant climate. Now, Nurgle, for the most part, has really great climate selection. It's also completely irrelevant because every Nurgle campaign, be it Epidemius, Kugaf, or Tamurkhan have to contend with mountains, which are unpleasant. This is a bigger issue for a Nurgle campaign than it is for the vast majority of other races in the game because of the infection limitation on your campaign and realistically how long it's going to take you to get your recruitment. You don't want to deal with unpleasant climate, but Creative Assembly has designed a situation in which during the course of Immortal Empire's campaigns, we're dealing with this a lot. This sucks. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is easily one of the worst decisions they made in the entirety of Runs of the King. Like, there were so many great decisions. Elspeth, Carl, Gelt, Malachi, top tier DLC. I mean, I'm not pissed off. I'm just pointing out that, yeah, this is a egregious oversight. I mean, Epidemius' campaign in its entirety is a joke that I will not cover in a video probably, because what's there to cover? It's a nothing campaign in a lot of ways, believe it or not. But I guess with Tamurkhan, my perspective is, yes, he's got some great mechanics, he's got good systems, but he's held back partly by the climate situation and partly because of the victory conditions and the racial design in certain ways. Like, I would dare say it, that if if Nurgle worked better as a race, or I guess if you want to go to a ridiculous level, if Nurgle had the same racial mechanics as Khorne, Tamurkhan would be one of the top 5 legendary lords in the game. Maybe top 10, maybe. As it stands, he's good, but I think he doesn't reach those heights. Largely because of the race. You can't just ignore that situation and that dynamic. But that's my perspective. My perspective is created by the fact that I do play a lot of campaigns. I have thousands of hours in Warhammer 3, and when you're playing campaign after campaign, testing stuff and all that, you kind of get tired of the design philosophy that Creative Assembly has, where there's some campaigns that really throw you on the deep end from the beginning, and those are very interesting and fun to play and give you a lot of choices and flexibility. But then there's campaigns with choices and flexibility that only come into play like 40, 60 turns in. Those are not interesting, and sadly, Tamurkhan is in that category. Questine here, signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and stay tuned for more.